vehicles left, and just 3 of these reproductions anywhere in the world that are capable of flying. It's a pretty special treat to get to see it fly. This is the first time one has ever visited AirVenture. You see him lining up to the left there on the runway. Just spare a thought for what it must have been like to see this airplane emerge during World War II, come into combat at a time when only piston-powered fighters made up the world's air forces.
Pretty quiet.
To be able to heat harden all of the engine parts at this phase. The aircraft itself is an engineering accomplishment by GE at the time. It should be said that other jet fighters were rapidly approaching the skies over Europe. The Gloucester Meteor, of course, would enter operational service just 1 day after the Messerschmitt 262 scored its first air-to-air victory. Shortly following the Gloucester Meteor would be the P-80 built by Lockheed, the grandfather of the T-33 that you saw flying just a few moments ago. And earlier we were also joined by a de Havilland Vampire. That would be the first single-engine jet fighter developed. And it's just incredible to be able to see almost all of those airplanes here at once in the skies on the same day.
Yes, we're very accustomed to having jet air shows, usually on a Thursday during the show. But adding the Bakes, the 262, the Vampire, the T-33 really shows us the lineage of everything from the Hemi 262 all the way up to the L-39.
One thing that you'll certainly note is that the aircraft that emerged after the Messerschmitt 262 start to feature a curious characteristic, that swept wing that you see on the airplane. Jet fighters prior to this featured conventional straight wings, as many of the piston-powered predecessors do. The Germans didn't sweep this wing because of a comprehensive understanding of its aerodynamic advantages. They swept it because they had a center of gravity issue with the aircraft. That's right, the wing on the 262 was swept.
We're talking about performance capabilities. Engines susceptible to mechanical failures, hotspots.
The only thing I
you are
want
not running this with you.
is the top side patch. Biggest thing I want.
Yes, we would have a
I just want that top
side.
All I want.
Because if anybody knows one thing about a Messerschmitt 262,
unless he gives us that pass.
Look off a pilot's control, but the engine had a full power.
Are they doing
because really the only one that I have access to is like 25. The only one that I would have access to is a ducted fan.
Reproduction, what else there is to demo?
I
don't even know if they make it anymore.
Otherwise you hotspot those engines, you heat up the blades, and that would be that.
So, go ahead.
We do not fly the airplane with Jumo 004, the jet engines that were originally used on the T-32. We use a CJ610 as the power plant. That's what you would have found on a Learjet some years ago.
It might get a little warm.
Now, Mike is staying relatively wide.
You'll like Ohio.
So, is the 262 able to
Right. I'll run carbon.
So don't fly the aircraft as aggressively as the Luftwaffe did back in the day, but it does bear mentioning that 33% of these aircraft in a Luftwaffe study conducted towards the end of the war were lost due to issues with the Jumo 004. 34% would be lost due to landing gear issues, which is interesting because the higher number is not well understood by the public at large. And about 10%
Now, the 262 will be on display in the Woburn area through the weekend. And you have mentioned previously that it looks different on the ground than what you might see in a museum. So explain to us why it looks different than you might see in Pensacola.
Yeah, so there are original survivors in museums and static collections. The limitations of the engines and of the airframe is why those have not been made into viable examples. What you're seeing here is the very next best thing, a reproduction so accurate that Messerschmitt allows for sequential application of construction methods. So the 5 airplanes that were built that yielded this one followed on from the wartime production by Messerschmitt numerically. What you see with this airplane when it's on the ground is an incredible stance given to it by its struts to near enough correctly its surface from flight. So airplanes that you find in the museum are generally not having nice surface of these struts. Getting a look at this thing on the ground is an incredible opportunity to take yourself back in time and see just how much of a leap forward in technology is We may notice that it has incredibly wide turning circles. Its speed gave it a great advantage over P-51s, but the pilots well understood that when the airplane slowed down to make its turn to avoid overgeeing the tail and pulling off those tail structures, that was the opportunity to strike. What Mike is doing right now is a porpoising maneuver that was used routinely by the Messerschmitt 262. The jets gave it an incredible ability to climb away from the bomber formation. The aircraft would nose down, move towards the formation, firing its 4 20mm cannons at the Allied heavy bombers. Then it would pull up and move away from the formation before diving back down to select another victim.
30mm. And in Warbird Alley, just the other day, you actually had
I know.
from World War II tells his story how he was able to shoot down. Not either on landing or on the ground, but actually R42.
Yeah, it bears mentioning that most folks are well aware that Allied pilots became pretty proficient at shooting these aircraft down. They would jump in as the aircraft were coming into land.
You would just make a pass and rapid volley all the rockets and hope you hit something.
But that didn't mean you couldn't get one high up in the sky. You just had to address the advantages that you had. In the case of Joe Peterberg, the World War II veteran we spoke with the other day, he had 5,000 feet of altitude advantage, and as the 262 pulled out of the bomber stream, he barreled down on it in his Mustang, bringing it directly into his gun sights. Mike has passed around behind us now, which is the sign that he's setting up for a photo pass, so you're going to want to get those cameras ready.
Our photo pass is coming in from the right. Mike Spalding, Military Aviation Museum's Messerschmitt 610.
Where was the sun when we needed it? I'm pretty.
The early
Thank you all. Part of some part you can do full originals like that, but considering that the originals would have been in German, it's all
manufactured under the pressure of Allied heavy bombing.
But if it's reproduction, they have the choice at that point. They want to make it an analog cockpit, which they could choose to do, but using modern instruments, it couldn't be. It might not be able to use the original. It depends on how it was done.
That sounds very unconventional.
It was recorded in the Messerschmitt documents that suggestion had come from a non-compliant entity.
You mentioned Mike Spalding, who is your chief pilot. He has
Coming in again.
his time zero. That is just recently reported. He also has time in all of the British aircraft, along with most everything else. Coming in for another photo pass from your left.
So Mike is one of the few pilots in the world who's had the opportunity to fly with the show, and I got under 2,000. Conducted the successful first flight of our Zero following its 10-year restoration. The same weekend we rolled our Messerschmitt 262 out of the repair shops at home. The airplane having sat for also a decade as we worked on some engineering challenges to put this incredible airplane back in the air. If you do get a chance to meet Mike Spalding down in Warbird Alley, one of the things you can ask him is how come